Welcome to First vs Last, a brand new series where we take the first game in a video game series and compare it to its latest release, seeing how it's evolved over time from various elements such as graphics, gameplay and story. With the very recent release of Assassin's Creed Odyssey earlier this month, I thought it would be a great series to focus on for the first episode. The original Assassin's Creed released back in 2007 for the 360, PS3 and PC, and began its life originally as a Prince of Persia title before becoming its own IP. When the game released, it was pretty unique, featuring a setting in both the past and modern day, with the main character Desmond reliving the events of one of his ancestors, Altair, during 1191 in a machine known as the Animus. Despite spending a majority of your time in the past through this machine, you would routinely spend moments in the present day attempting to understand exactly what was going on and why you were being forced to experience Altair's life as an assassin. Moving forward to 2018, and we have the 11th main title, Odyssey, for the PS4, Xbox One and PC. This latest game places you further back in time than ever before in 431 BCE during the Peloponnesian War. Unlike the first title, you have the choice of who the protagonist is, Alexios or Cassandra. Although this isn't the first time you've been able to play as a woman, it's the first time you can dictate which gender the protagonist is, because no matter which you pick, they are essentially the same person. Despite the first game's importance on the present day events, in Odyssey you're still witnessing Alexios/Cassandra through an Animus, but you spend extremely little time outside of it, often forgetting about it altogether the majority of your playthrough, and this is something that's been more and more the case with each new installment. In many ways this was a change for the better, as many complained it broke the immersion by being pulled out of the gameplay component constantly, but there are still a good chunk of people who really enjoyed that aspect of the titles, and currently it feels very much an afterthought that doesn't really lead anywhere. In addition, whereas Altair's story was heavily steeped in his part as an assassin and the Creed, Alexios/Cassandra's story doesn't have any involvement with the Assassin Brotherhood at all. This is a first for the series, I believe, as even Origins did have some link to the creation of the Creed. Shay begins as an assassin and rogue, and Edward comes into contact with the assassins plenty, even though he isn't one himself in Black Flag for the majority. This isn't inherently a bad thing. Moving away from the assassins in Odyssey has allowed Ubisoft the freedom to explore a time period and story they wouldn't have been able to otherwise, but it's understandable why some have expressed it doesn't feel like a true Assassin's Creed game. In terms of the general graphics, the original holds up surprisingly well, considering it's now 11 years old and a relatively early last-gen title, but one aspect that stands out the most is how muted the colours are, consisting largely of a brown colour palette, which is really noticeable when you compare it to Odyssey that feels more vibrant with lush green trees and a deep blue sea. The world itself is also a big improvement. Not only is it the biggest in the series, largely thanks to the aforementioned sea, but you can seamlessly move across it however you like, be on foot, horse or ship, without any loading screen or restrictions, which is quite different from the original. The original had smaller, densely packed cities which you could move between, however they felt very disjointed from one another, with slightly long-winded linear paths that featured a loading screen at the end. Despite both games incorporating climbing mechanics, due to Odyssey's larger world, you tend to use it less than in the original, and when you do you aren't scaling buildings quite as high or darting about rooftops quite as often. However, the mechanics have been improved a lot over the last decade, not only feeling quicker, but also more forgiving and accurate. With the first few games it was pretty common to scale a building you didn't intend to, or accidentally jump from one, leading to losing a large chunk of health, something I rarely encountered in the latest game. This is mostly due to the fact you no longer need to hold down a button to sprint like in the original, which also happened to be the same button mapped to climbing. One of the big changes to the series over time is with the combat. Going back to the original, its combat system was serviceable, but leaves a lot to be desired today. Although you can aimlessly swing your sword or dagger at enemies, it's not really all that effective. The best way of defeating them is to counter them, which ends up turning into a slightly tedious cycle of waiting till each enemy attacks, countering them, then rinse and repeating it until all are defeated. With Odyssey we have the hitbox system that Origins introduced, meaning bouts are no longer a 1v1 affair, feeling more engaging, dynamic and a lot faster paced. On top of that, you also have a lot of freedom in the style of weaponry you can use, along with multiple different unlockable abilities to create the type of warrior you want. Although I think Odyssey's combat system relies a little too heavily on these abilities, it's really great that players have options like this, some of the first didn't have at all. On top of that, there is a wealth of customization with tons of pieces of armour that not only look different, but have their own stat values, which is quite a contrast to Altair, who had one outfit throughout the entirety of the story. Being a series about assassins, naturally stealth has always been an important aspect, however it's not something it's always handled correctly. The first had plenty of moments where stealth was required, but you could only enter in very contextual moments, such as sitting on a bench or blending into a crowd. There was no actual way to enter stealth as and when you pleased, and it would remain like this for multiple games until Unity. Thankfully it's been refined over the last few entries, allowing you, for example, to tackle forts full of enemies completely undetected. A common criticism of Assassin's Creed when it debuted was its lack of variety, with a mission structure that felt repetitive pretty quickly. This was improved greatly in the second game, but the last two titles have opened this up even more, with tons of different things to do, from exploring caves, dealing with bounties, completing fetch quests, engaging in naval combat, or even attempting to romance an NPC. With so much to explore and so many quests to undertake, Odyssey is a much longer game than the original, with an average completion time of around 50 hours, with Assassin's Creed 1 clocking in at a more modest 15 hours. To some extent, this extended playtime is down to Odyssey incorporating a lot of RPG mechanics, which has resulted in the need to level up to take on certain quests or tackle certain enemies, which does cause an element of level grinding, arguably too much at times. The RPG mechanics in Odyssey do seem to be directly influenced by The Witcher 3, in fact it shares far more in common with that game than the original Assassin's Creed, from the way it handles numerous dialogue options, to the combat, and even the quest structure themselves. So there you have it, a quick comparison between the first game in the series and the last. Hopefully you found it interesting to see how much it has changed since its inception. Despite some of the changes possibly being seen as regression, such as the present day story being pushed to the side, and the lack of any real Assassin Brotherhood presence in the last two games, the series is in a great place at the moment. The combat is better, the world is bigger and more interesting to explore, not to mention there's a much greater variety of things to do that the first in particular sorely lacked. That's it for today. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe and hit that bell icon to receive notifications when future videos are posted. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.